Jim Morrison. Jim Morrison, the wild and unpredictable frontman of The Doors, turned a concert in Miami into a moment that would go down in rock history. Morrison was already known for pushing boundaries. His performances were unpredictable, electric, and a little bit dangerous. But that night in 1969 at the Dinner Key Auditorium, he took it up a notch. Morrison was late, allegedly drunk, and seemed determined to shock everyone. He riled up the crowd, shouting obscenities, making lewd gestures, and apparently taunting them with promises of an X-rated performance that never fully materialized. Some claimed he exposed himself on stage, although no clear photographic evidence has ever surfaced. Regardless, the Miami police didn't see it as a rock and roll show. They saw it as a criminal act. A few days later, Morrison had charges of lewd and lascivious behavior, indecent exposure, profanity, and public drunkenness. The media targeted Morrison's image, making him seem like a criminal. While Morrison denied actually exposing himself, the damage was done. The trial in 1970 turned into a circus that only worsened The Doors' already rebellious image. Fans rallied to Morrison's defense, but the judge wasn't having it. Morrison was convicted and sentenced to 6 months in jail plus a fine. He remained free on bail while he appealed the verdict, but the weight of it all, combined with his growing weariness of fame and constant battles with the press, left him disillusioned and tired. He never actually served jail time until he died in Paris in 1971 while still appealing the conviction. Axl Rose. Axl Rose, the fiery frontman of Guns N' Roses, spotted a fan in the crowd with a camera at a Guns N' Roses concert in St. Louis on July 2, 1991. Cameras weren't allowed at concerts back then, so this made Axl furious. He dove into the crowd mid-song to snatch the camera away, triggering an all-out brawl between security, fans, and band members. After climbing back on stage, Axl made it even wilder by grabbing the mic and saying, "Thanks to the lame-ass security, I'm going home," before slamming the microphone down and storming off. The situation escalated quickly as fans rioted, trashing the arena and turning the night into a full-scale disaster. After the dust settled, the city of St. Louis decided they wanted Axl to pay for what happened. Axl was charged with inciting a riot and causing property damage, and a warrant was put out for his arrest. The whole thing turned into a circus, with Axl laying low and avoiding returning to St. Louis for years. When he finally did get arrested in 1992, it was in New York City, right before a show at Madison Square Garden. Cops showed up at his door and took him in. He was booked, fingerprinted, and released on bail, all while the press turned the whole ordeal into front-page news. Axl ended up facing a judge in St. Louis a little while later, but he got off with probation, community service, and a fine instead of jail time. Mick Jagger. Mick Jagger found himself at the center of a media storm that would become one of the most iconic rock and roll legal dramas of all time. In 1967, he and Keith Richards were hanging out at Keith's country home, Redlands, when a tip led police to raid the place. Inside, they found amphetamines in Jagger's jacket that had been prescribed to him legally in Italy, but the authorities weren't really after a slap on the wrist. They wanted to make an example out of the Rolling Stones, who were rising fast and shaking up conservative Britain with their rebellious image. Jagger was charged and sentenced to 3 months in Brixton prison, and the public found the news hard to believe. The idea of one of the most famous faces in rock being locked up like a common criminal was scandalous, and, to a lot of fans, flat-out outrageous. But here's where it gets more interesting. After spending just a couple of days in the infamous prison, Jagger was suddenly released. It turns out that the public backlash had been so intense that even the Times newspaper ran an editorial defending him, claiming the punishment didn't fit the so-called crime. Jagger walked out of prison with more street cred than ever, and the whole ordeal only boosted the band's image as untouchable rock rebels. The Rolling Stones, with their swagger and fearless attitude, had become the talk of the town in the 1960s, and Jagger's brief stay in Brixton only added fuel to that fire. Sid Vicious. Sid Vicious, the notorious bassist of the Sex Pistols, joined the Sex Pistols in 1977, replacing Glenn Matlock, and quickly earned a reputation for his violent antics and heavy drug use. Despite his lack of musical skill, Sid embodied the band's sneering attitude and rebellious spirit. His relationship with American groupie Nancy Spungen became a central, chaotic part of his life. The two had a toxic love affair that often left those around them concerned for their safety. Then, in October 1978, the relationship reached a tragic end. Sid and Nancy were living at the Chelsea Hotel in New York City, a place already known for its bohemian residents and dark energy. On the morning of October 12th, Nancy was found dead from a single stab wound to the abdomen. Sid was immediately arrested and charged with second-degree murder. Although he claimed to have no recollection of what happened, Sid's erratic behavior and his history of domestic disputes with Nancy made him the prime suspect. Released on bail, Sid's downward spiral only got worse. He was later arrested again for assaulting Todd Smith, Patti Smith's brother, with a broken bottle at a nightclub. While awaiting trial for Nancy's murder, he overdosed on heroin and died on February 2, 1979, at the age of 21. His death, just months after Nancy's, became the final chapter in their tragic love story. Many believe that Nancy's death was a tragic accident of a couple too far gone in their own chaos, while others suspect there may have been more than meets the eye. Sid's death cut short any chance of finding out the truth, leaving behind several rumors and unanswered questions. James Brown. James Brown, known as the Godfather of Soul, had a very eventful life that included multiple run-ins with the law. One of the most famous incidents occurred in 1988, when Brown entered an insurance seminar next to his office in Augusta, Georgia. He was brandishing a shotgun and demanding to know who had been using his private bathroom. Witnesses were stunned by Brown's sudden and aggressive behavior, which quickly escalated from confusion to outright fear. This led to a high-speed pursuit in 2 states, with Brown speeding down highways in his pickup truck while police tried to stop him. The pursuit turned into a spectacle, with news helicopters following the chase and capturing footage of the aging music icon weaving through traffic at high speeds. His eventual capture involved spike strips that punctured his tires and several collisions that finally brought the dramatic chase to an end. Brown was charged with a series of offenses, including carrying an unlicensed firearm, driving under the influence of drugs, and assault. In December 1988, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison for failing to stop for police and for drug and weapons possession. During his incarceration at the State Park Correctional Institute in South Carolina, Brown struggled with his circumstances, but still performed for fellow inmates on occasion, maintaining his role as a performer even while imprisoned. These small shows, often featuring his biggest hits, helped Brown cope with the boredom and tension of prison life and offered brief entertainment to the other inmates, who were thrilled to see such a famous performer in their midst. Brown served a little over 2 years before being released on parole in 1991. Vince Neil, the lead vocalist of the glam metal band Motley Crue, was driving his red 1972 Ford Pantera in Redondo Beach, California, after a party at his home on the night of December 8, 1984. His passenger was Nicholas Razzle Dingley, the drummer for the Finnish band Hanoi Rocks. Neil, who was heavily intoxicated at the time, lost control of the car and crashed into another vehicle. The crash killed Dingley instantly and seriously injured 2 passengers in the other vehicle. Neil was immediately arrested and charged with vehicular manslaughter and driving under the influence of alcohol. In 1985, he pleaded guilty to the charges and was sentenced to 30 days in jail, 5 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and $2.6 million in restitution to the victims. Despite the severity of the accident and the tragic loss of life, Neil ended up serving only 15 days of his sentence due to good behavior. The case became infamous in rock history, not just because of the celebrity involved, but because of how lightly the consequences seemed to be handled compared to the gravity of the crime. Critics and fans alike questioned how the rich and famous could seemingly escape the same punishment that might have landed someone else behind bars for years. The incident had a lasting impact on Neil's life and reputation, as well as on Motley Crue's image. While Neil returned to the stage and continued to ride the wave of Motley Crue's success, the memory of that night never completely went away. The crash became one of the most notorious episodes in the history of rock music, overshadowing Neil's successful career. David Crosby. David Crosby was the iconic singer-songwriter and a founding member of both the Byrds and Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. He had a series of run-ins with the law due to his long-standing struggles with substance abuse, particularly in 1982. He was arrested in Dallas, Texas, for possession of drugs and a .45 caliber handgun. This arrest was the beginning of a turbulent period for Crosby, as his battles with addiction and the law intensified. Although he is praised for his significant contributions to the music world, Crosby's substance abuse and the associated legal troubles took a heavy toll on his personal and professional life. The situation reached a critical point in 1985 when Crosby was arrested once again, this time in California. He was found driving under the influence of cocaine and possessing a loaded gun. His probation was revoked due to his repeated offenses, and Crosby was sentenced to 5 years in prison. In 1986, he spent 9 months in a Texas state prison where he was forced to confront the severity of his addictions. Life behind bars was a sharp contrast to the stages and studios that had defined his career. He endured being in cramped cells, having strict routines, and facing the harsh reality of life cut off from the freedoms he had always taken for granted. While incarcerated, Crosby began to embrace sobriety, recognizing that his lifestyle had become unsustainable. In interviews later on, he described how prison stripped away the illusions of rock and roll glamour and left him staring at the consequences of his choices. His prison time, though an obvious fall from the heights of his career, helped in his eventual recovery. David Bowie. David Bowie was in the middle of his Thin White Duke era in 1976, a time when he was touring the US with glam, mystery, and a whole lot of chaos. It was also a time when his personality was just as striking as his music, with his sharp suits, slicked back hair, and sophistication. During a stop in Rochester, New York, Bowie was staying at a hotel with none other than punk legend Iggy Pop. The night took a turn when the police came knocking. They raided the room and reportedly found about half a pound of marijuana. Bowie, Iggy, and 2 others were arrested and taken to the Monroe County Jail. Bowie ended up spending a night behind bars, dressed in full Rockstar fashion, surrounded by cold walls and concrete floors. But even in custody, Bowie handled it all with that same unique grace that defined his stage presence. He signed autographs for officers and carried himself with that same odd elegance he always had. Like the arrest was just another act in his tour performance. He was released the next morning after posting $2,000 bail, which he easily covered. What's wild is that the crowd outside the courthouse greeted him like a hero. As he walked out of the courthouse, fans lined the streets, cheering him on. Eventually, the charges were dropped, and the whole thing faded into rock history as one of those unusual moments. In fact, it barely affected his career, and only reinforced the myth that Bowie wasn't really of this world, and that he could handle and overcome chaos with ease. Thank you for watching this video. Let us know who was your favorite rock star in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and share it with anyone you know who would love to see it. If you'd like to see more content like this, then subscribe to our channel and click the notification icon so you don't miss our next updates.